how you paint that picture is important, right? But before you show up, the brand is kind of what's driving the conversation. The brand is what's creating this perception of higher value.
Welcome to the Design Rush podcast. I'm your host, Kia Johnson. Today's guest is Adam Broada, executive career strategist, former Amazon leader, and founder of Broada Coaching. He's helped over 300 senior leaders land roles at Tesla, Google, Meta, and beyond. As the founder of Broada Coaching, Adam works with senior and principal level executives to position themselves for career-defining roles. In episode 88 of the Design Rush podcast, Adam reveals how executives can build demand for their expertise, scale their influence, and make themselves indispensable, not just available. If you're a C-suite leader, founder, or executive looking to level up in 2025, this conversation is for you. Watch the episode on YouTube, listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Got a story worth sharing? Email us at spotlight@designrush.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more executive insights. Adam, welcome. Let's get stuck in this rapid fire questions. I hope you brought your A game with you today.
I'm ready. Fire away.
All right. Amazing. Okay, so one mindset shift that changed your life forever.
It would probably be within the first year of management when I was at Boeing. I was a brand new manager. I was about 25. I was burnt out and I hated the job. And the mindset shift was stop trying to act like your boss and your boss's boss and just find a style that works for you. And when I finally just let go of that old mindset and embraced the new one, everything got better.
When do you do your best thinking? Early mornings or late nights?
It's a hotly debated question that changes often. I'm going to go ahead and say early mornings is best. There's no distractions. The day hasn't started. I don't kind of have the fog of war, but buzzing around my brain. So early morning.
If you weren't coaching executives, what would you be doing right now?
Probably just doing something with my kids. I've got a 3 and a 5-year-old, and I'm trying to force them to do like basic life skills like ride bikes and swim. So I would just probably be right back into that. That'd be where I go.
One trait that instantly signals a high potential client to you.
Self-awareness. Somebody that has the ability to sense how other people are thinking or feeling generally signals a really high level of EQ, where they could adjust how they're speaking in the middle of conversation based off the reactions that they're getting from other people instead of just kind of plowing through whatever's coming out of their mouth. I have the tendency to do that. But yeah, that's one sign of high EQ.
Those was actually some really cool answers. Thanks so much for that, Adam. We're going to move to the next part of our discussion here today. I mean, Adam, you have helped hundreds of executives land roles at companies like Tesla, Google, and Meta. What is it that leaders from big brands actually take into consideration when making a decision, would you say?
Yeah, in terms of hiring, there's a lot of factors that play into that. I still think after 13, 14 years of hiring myself and then 5, 6 years of coaching now, the number one consideration from the start of the process to the end of the process is value proposition and your ability to deliver repeatable results, right? When I have those, when I have interviews or when I'm screening or when I'm coaching, I'm constantly telling executives, it's one thing to have this string of accomplishments, right? It's another to have accomplishments that are driven by repeatable systems. Companies want to hire executives that have systems and methods that deliver value every time, right? If you leverage some high position relationship at that one firm to make something happen, that's very different than you building a system that's repeatable where you could deliver that result over and over and over again. So I'd say that's one of the big things for us is like you have to have quantifiable impact. You have to understand how the work you're doing drives results and performance. You need to know those things. You need to be able to articulate them very well. But I also think there's this theme of, understanding how to create value where the value wasn't expected and doing things or really like operating in a way that's repeatable, right? You could find that value opportunity over and over again, regardless of the company, regardless of the team. That's kind of the catnip that I think those high profile folks are looking for when they're hiring.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about, that repeatable scenario. So I'm just wondering if you're the kind of person that's looking for that value in those sort of special places, wouldn't it be sort of more risk-taking scenario?
I think everything at the executive level comes with a certain percentage of risk. Like, you don't want to be painted as the executive that can't take risk, because you'll get passed by the people that are, right? So everything is about calculated risk and managing risk. And there's different tactics and different expectations, I think, depending upon the job or depending upon the industry. A good example is like an executive at Boeing managing risk, where the tolerance for risk is incredibly low, right? You cannot, you can't make a lot of mistakes with airplanes, right? An executive at Amazon, right, where we're shipping boxes, the risk tolerance is much higher, right? Like, sure, the box went to the wrong spot. Okay, no one got hurt. So it very much depends on industry and role and the environment you're in. But yes, managing risks and kind of taking calculated, strategic, leaps ahead is absolutely part of the job.
Totally. So, what would you say is then the difference between like a C-level leader who's strategically positioned and then one who's simply just available?
Oh, that's a really good question. We could talk about that for a long time. To kind of, well, I mean, there's probably two things I'll say, right? I think in the modern age in 2025, I think the executives that are creating demand for their services and building high level relationships and creating opportunities and getting things done, like they're leveraging high powered networks and they're using brands to help drive those networks. Like, so the things you say on social media and what you put out there and how you present yourself is all potentially part of your brand. And the more powerful brand you have, potentially the networking side of your job gets a little bit easier. The second thing that I would say, between somebody that's really really performing and somebody that's just existing in the job, is relationships. Just beyond brand and networks, but how people perceive the way they're treated by you. I've never met a leader, that treated people really well with respect and was liked and appreciated by the people underneath them, that wasn't getting top level performance out of their organization. Because that's the really big difference at the executive level. Like, your job is to get performance out of larger groups of people, right? It's easy to motivate yourself. It's easy to, get the performance when it's just you. Why directors and executives make the big money is because they have tools and systems and mechanisms to get that performance from large groups of people, which is much harder to do. So, the folks that can do that job and have great relationships and treat people equitably and with respect and kind of, they've always outperformed. So those are the two things I'd say: is relationships and brand, I think, are the things right now.
One of the things is that in terms of just the workplace, and I think especially in this day and age, is that whole thing of like sustainability. So how can I, as an executive, then make myself indispensable to a company, like before and after I join?
Yeah, I mean, before you join, it's back to that brand question, right? Like,
Right.
you need to have visible, observable evidence of consistent performance. Well, so and again, we coach this inside of our community that, even at lower levels or in individual positions, there needs to be these themes, right? The theme of having the ability to solve problems, the theme of creating value where it's not expected versus adding value where it is. You know, coming in and doing the job and doing a great job is different than coming in and doing the job and finding problems to solve where you're creating something that's valuable. Um, but yeah, we want those themes to kind of carry throughout your career. And I think how you paint that picture is important, right? But before you show up, the brand is kind of what's driving the conversation. The brand is what's creating this perception of higher value in terms of what you might be paid or how you might be compensated. If you're the person that can show up, whether the company is crazy chaotic or whether the company is, performing and streamlined, but find opportunity to get more value out of what they're doing or to increase value for customers or to, solve problems in a valuable way, it's going to be very difficult for leaders above you to let you go. In some cases, if you're really good at that, it's going to be really difficult for leaders above you to retain you, right? And that's why they'd want to pay you more, and that's why they'd want to promote you. So yeah, you create the opportunities for yourself, whether inside the company or outside the company, by, in my opinion, it's creating value consistently.
Hmm. I mean, you're talking so much about branding, like the personal brand. So, personal branding, I mean, it's become so essential for senior leaders. But I would think not just as a soft skill, but also a strategic advantage. I know you've been talking about it a little bit right now, but maybe let's just kind of zone in on that, and unpack it a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some misconceptions on brand. I think, if you go ask the average person, they think that means a LinkedIn page, right? They think that means LinkedIn content, and I mean that's a part of the spectrum of what makes a successful brand. But the most important thing for brand is, again, like it's what you say, it's what you physically do, it's the actions you take, it's how you treat people. Like that's your brand, right? How you want to package that up and present that on the internet is completely, it's a different conversation. It's part of how the world perceives you, but everything at the, foundational brand level starts with what you're saying and doing every single day. If you can't do the baby steps right, then I don't think you need to worry about the internet and LinkedIn and Instagram, right? Like you've got to nail some of the foundational things first before you
Yeah.
would want to grow it and get more public. But kind of to your question, it does feel like the tides have changed, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, where more executives and directors and even mid and senior principal level professionals are realizing, if I create this persona of expertise and capability and knowledge and value, I can create opportunities for myself. And that has changed the game just a little bit. It really has, right? If you've got a following that trusts you and listens to you, the thought would be, if you lost your job or needed a job, you're way more likely to get opportunities quicker. If you're doing a really great job at some company and you're talking about it, you're way more likely to potentially get interest from other firms that need that help. So I think it's changed the game I think it's changed the game because it's given more power back to the performers, right? If you're a high performer and you're delivering consistently and you've got this brand that accompanies your internal perception at a firm, you're basically building a safety net for yourself, right? You're building
Yeah.
career insurance, you're building exit paths and options, and those are good things, right? You can leverage those to negotiate, you can leverage those to, move faster. And I don't know who wouldn't want that in the career space.
What would you say then do most executives get wrong about negotiating leadership packages and equity, for example?
Yeah,
Mm,
another really
yeah.
loaded question. To
Mm,
try and like zoom out of that just a little
yeah,
bit, right? I
sure.
think you gotta start with the disclaimer that every company is gonna look at executive compensation packages different. Rev share versus RSUs versus RSAs versus, you know, equity ownership. There's just a long list of things that could potentially be on the table. I'd say at lower level executive roles, let's say senior director or director level positions, um, I think I think the number one misstep for high level leaders is, um, and I guess I need to kind of caveat what I say, but I think too many people, and this is me based off of what I see in my community, right? So inside of my career transition community, I see a lot of executive leaders over index on the value of equity, right? Over index on, hey, I need stock shares, right? I need to have shares in the company. I need to have stock. I need to have RSAs, RSUs, as opposed to just taking guaranteed cash in a base. It's hard to explain because this trend has changed year over year. But let's say 2024, I will get more executives that think or believe that the best compensation package is one where they have equity or, let's say, restricted stock units, and they're pressing for that without really knowing why they're pressing for it. And when we ask them out, like, why do you think that's a priority for you. It's like, well, that's how the best companies pay leaders, right? Like I should be getting that because that's normal. It's like, well, if they're going to offer you 350K base, like that's we would take that over, a 200 base with some percentage of equity that you may or may not get. You need to run the numbers, right? But as silly as that sounds, like, yeah, I see a lot of lower level executives kind of coming into that space, making the assumption that they need equity without really doing the math and figuring out, like what's the probability that this equity hits or doesn't hit, right? Or what's the probability that this equity hits a certain value? Because a lot of, again, like a lot of what I saw last year was senior level, principal level, director level performers coming out of large tech companies, right? Tech did a lot of layoffs. They sliced a lot of teams. So there's a lot of heavily qualified people coming into the market. And startups, which were exploding last year, right? We're trying to pick these people up into higher level positions. And as I said, like I saw those individuals trying to push for equity at a startup that there was no guaranteed value of that stock, right? Like why would you trade, guaranteed cash in a base for something that we really don't know the value of? Obviously they think it's worth this, but there's nothing, there's not enough performance from that company to indicate that that's real. So that's probably the first thing that comes to mind, is kind of this assumption that, well, I should get equity because that's what's cool. And I don't think that's always the case.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of really understanding that and doing your homework, doing your research
Yeah.
when you are possibly in that negotiation stage already with a company, trying to understand, what exactly am I going to be benefiting here? What is the best strategy moving forward? Totally getting you 100%. I want to move to my next question now, Adam, and find it from you. What executives can learn from how companies like Tesla or SpaceX attract and retain their top tier talent?
Yeah, those are two really interesting companies to pick, and I'm going to assume you
Yeah.
pick those two on purpose. Um,
Yes.
yeah, so I guess the way I would say it is those companies in particular sell very, very hard on the connection to personal passion. They're really, really big on the vision of we are literally going to change the world, right? We're going to change the course of human history. And do you want to be a part of it or not, right? Do you want to go work for a company that, makes golf balls, or do you want to come and put people on freaking Mars, right? Like, what do you want your legacy to be? So, in terms of like how those firms in particular attract and retain, they have a really clear value proposition in what the company, is going to do for that person's legacy. They play very much to the passions side of the talent that they're attempting to attract. And I would say executive level roles at those firms, the compensation, I wouldn't call it like otherworldly, right? I wouldn't necessarily say, SpaceX has a track record of paying directors more than, other prominent FANG level firms or Fortune 50 firms. I'd say they're relatively average. In some cases, they're below average. But what they do really, really well is really crystal clear job descriptions on how that person's role is going to have some sort of influence in the course of human history. And I've put people at those firms, and what sells them is those pitches, right? It's, we're going to pay you well. We're going to give you a fantastic role. Your job is going to be fun and challenging and exciting. You're going to be working on things that no other person in the world is working on. And if you deliver this thing, you're going to have a piece of human history, that you'll have a part of for the rest of your life. And that's, you're going to build your legacy. And, and it's hard to say no to that sometimes, because it's like, gosh, like this work is so meaningful, as opposed to, again, like coming in and building a piece of software that's been built 100 times, right? And you're kind of sitting there comparing, like, well, gosh, what do I want? What do I want the next 5 years of my life to look like? Do I want to do something unprecedented, or do I want to just kind of repeat the same thing? So they do a great job of selling the vision and the mission, and then connecting that vision and mission to the talent's why, right?
So Adam, what's the smartest way you would say an executive can actually scale their influence like beyond the role?
When you're an executive, it's really important that you focus some percentage of your time, effort, and energy on the business, right? Growing the business and scaling the business and meeting KPIs and all that other stuff. I think the answer to your question, though, if I'm being honest, is making sure that there's a fundamental component of your strategy, your development strategy, your growth strategy, your business strategy that remains with people, right? That remains with people. I think the best executives and leaders understand that they cannot lose sight of people development. And again, if you want to build your legacy and facilitate relationships and grow your network and build brands and executive presence and all these things, creating programs that make other people better in addition to just businesses better, I think is fundamental, right? Go build mentorship programs, go build L&D programs, train people at every level on how to improve leadership skills. Like, don't ever lose sight of the fact that your business is people, and make sure that your people understand that you believe that's important. That's how I'd answer that one, is don't ever let yourself get too far away from that truth.
From a
Okay.
brand's perspective, what are the red flags when choosing partners like coaches, agencies, or consultants to actually support executive growth? And then what would you say are sort of like the green flags, you know?
Again, very loaded question that we could probably write a book on. I'm going to kind of summate everything into one thing,
Please, yes.
right? And this is based off of my 15 years on the hiring and coaching side. I actually just posted about this on LinkedIn, I think a couple days ago. But I believe this to be true. I think when I'm being interviewed by people, like when I'm being interviewed by potential employers, or when I'm looking for coaches or mentors or people to work with, I think the number one green/red flag, because it could go either way, is somebody that understands the principle. And let's use managers for just a second, right? A manager that understands the principle that when their team succeeds, they succeed, as opposed to they succeed first and that somehow brings their team up, right? That principle extends through all those other things: partners, coaches, consultants, blah, 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 right? When leaders get that, hey, the number one priority is to build and improve the performance of the team. When my team is performing, therefore I'm performing, as opposed to I'm going to focus on me, the manager, and I'm going to get the credit, and I'm going to, look a certain way, and I'm going to say these specific things. And when I do better as a manager, somehow my team will do better. That is the false belief. I'm looking for people that understand the opposite. So when I'm interviewing, I'm asking questions to try and figure that out, right? When I'm looking for coaches, I'm asking questions to try and figure that out. I want to work with people that understand that it's their job to make other people better. And by doing that, their business or their brand or their, performance at work will improve. Leadership is an interesting space. But like I said, I don't want to work with people that just want me so that they look better, which is an interesting thing to try and study.
If I were to look at leadership now and leadership from a couple of years back, I think there is a very fundamental and significant change and a shift at the moment, because that's very much an old traditional way of looking at it, me first and then my team after. And I think more and more leaders are now realizing that it needs to be the thing of, like my team does really well, I do really well, and it's this way that we all merge together to get to where we want to be. So Adam, how would you say how rather does strategic positioning at the executive level tie directly into profitability for both the individual and the business they lead?
Strategic positioning happens all the time. It's not something that happens once a year. It's not something that happens every 5 years. I think strategic positioning is happening on a weekly basis. And the best companies, best leaders have mechanisms to make sure that the strategy is constantly being audited and evaluated, so that they are staying ahead of competitors or trends or certain analytics. I am a big fan of kind of the weekly business review monthly business review, quarterly business review mechanism, right? There's some sort of business auditing happening every week. There's key metrics that we're looking at literally every week, and then we kind of zoom up from there, right? There's things that we're looking at every month, there's questions that we're asking every month, and then there's bigger, more thought-provoking things that happen every quarter. So that's typically the operating system that I would deploy. I even use that model inside of my coaching business, right? We do something pretty similar to that. And then in addition to that kind of weekly, monthly, quarterly, there's some sort of a LRBP that sits on top of that, right? And maybe that LRBP is 1 to 3 years, maybe it's 3 to 5, but there's some sort of long-term, planning document that's asking these kind of almost hypothetical questions, right? Like, what's AI going to do to this business in 6 months, in 12 months, in 18 months, in 3 years, right? Like, how do we start planning for that and thinking about that? So yeah, positioning, in my opinion, right, it's all about discipline. It's all about staying consistent. It's all about forcing yourself to ask what might even seem like silly questions. But yeah, that's what the best companies in the world do, right? I mean, there's people specifically assigned to facilitate that type of a process.
Who are peers who've most influenced your thinking on leadership and value creation? Perhaps you have some mentors along the way that have done that for you.
To be honest, I think my dad, is probably the person that would put on the top of that list. And he's not necessarily like a business magnate, he's just a normal guy. But I've learned so much from him in terms of like how to trust people and how to be analytical and how to think through my decisions and how to listen before speaking. And I mean, he'd have to be on that list. I'd say my wife's on that list also, in terms of influencing me to think about how to not lose myself in business and how to always, kind of keep an eye on other people, whether that's in my life or in my team. Or I sometimes have the ability to kind of over-engineer things to the point where I stop valuing the conversation. I want to just build systems and systems and systems. And sometimes it's like, hey, you need to talk to people, right? And
yeah,
she's really good about that. In terms of peers, people that have kind of been there, done that. I think about like Daniel Bottero as a business coach. I think about, Austin Belsack as somebody that inspired me years and years ago to, jump into the career coaching thing on LinkedIn. I think about other significant business leaders that I've worked with at Boeing and Amazon, and I don't want to give their names because I'm not sure if they want me to, but there's a long list of people.
That's amazing. So Adam, I don't know if you have any parting words for us, any advice for our executives out there that you want to sort of finish off the conversation with?
Don't go it alone. That'd be my
like
biggest
that.
tip for 2025, right? If
Nice.
there's something you want to get better at, if there's something you want to work on, if you want to, meet more people, if you want to build a brand, if you want to, become more strategic, if you want to get better at presentations, again, like, please understand that the best leaders in the world didn't become the best leaders in the world because they just, did everything on their own and put the team on their back and just grew all these skills overnight. Like, that doesn't happen, right? CEOs have coaches for everything, right? These high performing, leaders and executives that build companies, like, they have people that help them with so many things. Don't go it alone. Get some help, right? Ask people for help, hire help, go get a coach, go learn from someone who's done it before, but that's the hack. Don't try to do it by yourself.
Love that. Adam, thank you so much for the conversation. Thank you for joining us on the Design Rush podcast. It was so lovely chatting with you and looking forward to seeing where your next adventure is going to be taking you. We'll be keeping an eye on that.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Curious about what top brands look for when choosing an agency? Tune in to our latest episodes where we reveal the decision-making secrets of leading brands. Subscribe to the Design Rush podcast and stay ahead of the competition.